Emma sat hunched over her cluttered desk, surrounded by a tangle of wires, old circuit boards, and the comforting hum of her amateur radio setup. The tiny basement room was her sanctuary, a place to escape the monotony of her small town. Tonight was no different. She adjusted the dials, her fingers deftly moving across the knobs, searching for a hint of life on the airwaves. The usual static filled the room, punctuated by faint, distant voices from other enthusiasts. Then, at precisely 11:57 p.m., something unusual crackled through the speakers. It began as a low, rhythmic hum, almost musical. Emma leaned in, her brow furrowing, as the hum shifted into a strange mix of static and whispers. "Can you hear me?" Emma froze. The words were faint, distorted, but unmistakable. Grabbing her notepad, she scribbled down the frequency. 13.770 megahertz. "Is this some kind of prank?" she muttered, adjusting the dials to clear up the signal. As the static softened, the voice returned, eerily calm but fragmented. "Danger. Find the place. Coordinates. Before. Too late." Suddenly the transmission cut out, leaving nothing but static in its wake. Emma leaned back in her chair, heart racing. She rewound the recording she'd automatically captured and played it back, amplifying the audio. There it was again, a string of numbers buried beneath the static. Emma jotted them down, realizing they were coordinates. Curious and unnerved, she plugged them into her computer. The coordinates pointed to a location just outside town, a stretch of forest near an abandoned bunker that had been the source of urban legends for years. Locals whispered about strange lights and odd noises, but no one ever ventured close. The next morning, Emma shared the signal with her friend Nate, a tech-savvy skeptic who enjoyed debunking mysteries as much as she enjoyed chasing them. "It's probably just an old short-wave broadcast bleeding over," Nate said, leaning back in his chair. "Happens all the time with old equipment." "But what about the coordinates?" Emma shot back, showing him the map. "And the voice? It was asking for help." "Look," Nate said, "if it's really coming from this bunker, we can check it out. The worst-case scenario, we waste an afternoon." By sundown, Emma and Nate stood at the edge of the forest, flashlights in hand. The bunker loomed in the distance, its rusted metal doors overgrown with ivy. The air felt colder here, and Emma couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. As they approached the bunker, Nate's handheld scanner picked up a faint signal, stronger than anything they'd expected. "It's the same frequency," he muttered, eyes narrowing. "But it's stronger here, like it's coming from right inside." Emma's pulse quickened. "Let's go in." The bunker's doors creaked open, revealing a long, dark corridor. The walls were lined with ancient equipment, radio transmitters, old dials, and monitors covered in decades of dust. Nate swept his flashlight across the room, illuminating faded military insignias on the walls. "This place is ancient," Nate said, his voice echoing eerily. Emma knelt by a console, her flashlight illuminating a dusty speaker. Just as she reached for a knob, the signal erupted from the speaker, louder and clearer than ever. "You shouldn't be here," the voice whispered, sending chills down her spine. Before either of them could react, the doors slammed shut behind them. The heavy doors slammed shut with an ominous clang, plunging the bunker into near darkness. Emma's flashlight flickered as her breathing quickened. Nate rushed to the door, tugging at the rusted handle. "It's stuck," he said, his voice tight. "How does a door slam shut on its own?" Emma ignored him, her attention locked on the console in front of her. The signal buzzed through the speaker, now sharp and unrelenting. She turned a dial instinctively, clearing the static. "Leave, before it's too late," the voice whispered again, sending shivers down her spine. "This is insane," Nate said, stepping back from the door. "That voice. It's not a recording. It's responding to us." "Exactly," Emma whispered, more fascinated than afraid. She scanned the room, her flashlight landing on a stack of dusty folders and reels of tape on a nearby shelf. "Look at this." She grabbed one of the folders and flipped it open. The faded documents were stamped with military insignias and labeled Project Echo. Emma skimmed the papers, her stomach churning as she read. Objective: capture and store human consciousness through sound frequencies, intended for use in espionage and psychological warfare. "They were experimenting with people," Emma said, her voice shaking. "They were trying to record minds." Nate picked up one of the reels, his face pale. "What does that even mean? Record minds? How?" "They must have believed sound waves could somehow trap a person's consciousness," Emma guessed, struggling to make sense of it herself. "Maybe even communicate with them after, you know." Nate shook his head, looking at the speaker as the signal grew louder, now almost a low growl. "This is insane. We need to get out of here." Emma wasn't ready to leave. Her curiosity burned brighter than her fear. She loaded one of the tapes into a nearby player and hit play. The room filled with a distorted recording of a man's voice. Subject 12, failed integration. Memory loss severe. Terminate experiment. The tape crackled, then shifted into a woman's voice, faint and desperate. "Help me. It hurts. Please, don't let them." The recording cut off abruptly, replaced by the eerie hum of the signal. "These weren't experiments," Emma said, her voice trembling. "They were torturing people." "Emma, stop," Nate said, his voice rising. "This place is wrong. We shouldn't be here." As if to punctuate his warning, the signal suddenly spiked, blasting through the speakers with deafening force. The room shook, and the lights flickered violently. Then for a moment, everything went silent. A figure appeared at the far end of the corridor, illuminated by the faint glow of the bunker's emergency lights. It wasn't fully human. Its shape flickered like static, its outline wavering as if struggling to hold form. "Who's there?" Emma called out, gripping her flashlight tightly. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it took a step closer, its movements jerky and unnatural. The signal returned, now pulsating in time with the figure's steps. Nate grabbed Emma's arm. "We're leaving, now." But before they could move, the figure spoke, its voice distorted and layered with static. "Find the source. Stop the loop, or you'll become one of us." The figure dissolved into the static as quickly as it appeared, leaving Emma and Nate frozen in fear. "We need to find the source of this signal," Emma said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Are you kidding?" Nate snapped. "We need to find a way out." Emma pointed to a map pinned to the wall near the console. A red circle marked a room labeled Control Center. "That's where it's coming from," Emma said. "If we shut it down, maybe we can stop this." Reluctantly, Nate nodded. "Fine. But if we don't make it out of here in one piece, I'm haunting you forever." Together they headed deeper into the bunker, the signal growing louder with every step. The narrow hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, the flickering emergency lights casting unsettling shadows. The signal grew louder, pulsating through the walls like a heartbeat. Emma clutched her flashlight tightly, her eyes darting to every corner. "Tell me again why we're going toward the creepy sound," Nate muttered, gripping a rusted pipe he'd picked up as an improvised weapon. "Because if we don't stop it, it won't stop," Emma said, her voice firm despite the growing dread in her chest. At the end of the corridor, a metal door loomed. Unlike the rest of the bunker, this door was pristine, its surface unmarked by rust or decay. Stenciled across it were the words, "Control Center, authorized personnel only." Nate hesitated. This feels like the part in the movie where everyone dies. Emma gave him a tight smile. Let's try not to be a cliché. She pushed the door open. The room was massive, filled with rows of blinking consoles and tangled wires. A central machine dominated the space, a monstrous device with a web of tubes and speakers, its surface pulsing with an eerie green light. Above it, a monitor displayed a looping waveform. The signal. Emma approached the machine cautiously. It hummed with a low, unnatural energy, and the air around it felt heavy, like stepping into a storm. "This is it," she whispered. Nate pointed to a terminal nearby. "Look at this." The terminal screen displayed a series of logs, the most recent entry dated decades ago. Experiment escalation. Looping consciousness storage successful. Subjects showing prolonged mental distress. Machine is self-sustaining. Nate scrolled further down. They were trying to store people's minds in this thing, but it looks like they didn't know how to turn it off. They didn't care, Emma said, anger rising in her voice. They just left it running, with all those people trapped inside. As if in response, the machine roared to life. The lights in the room dimmed, and the signal blasted through the speakers, deafening and relentless. The sound wasn't just noise, it was a voice, or rather, voices. Layered, overlapping cries of anguish and despair filled the room. "Please, end it. Make it stop." Emma clapped her hands over her ears, tears streaming down her face. "They're trapped, all of them." Nate's eyes widened. "If we shut it down, we might set them free." "But what happens to us?" Emma asked, her voice shaking. The machine began to pulse erratically, the lights flashing brighter and faster. From the speakers, a single voice rose above the chaos. "Destroy it, or join us." The console beside Emma beeped, displaying a warning. Critical overload imminent. Manual shutdown required. Emma spotted a lever on the side of the machine labeled Emergency Termination. Without hesitation, she grabbed it. The moment she touched it, a surge of energy shot through her, freezing her in place. For a brief moment, her vision blurred, and she wasn't in the bunker anymore. She was somewhere else, floating in a vast, empty void. Around her, shadowy figures drifted aimlessly, their faces distorted and frozen in expressions of torment. "Help us," one of them whispered, reaching out to her. Emma yanked her hand back, snapping out of the vision. The machine's hum grew louder, and the room began to shake violently. "Do it, Emma," Nate shouted, gripping the console to steady himself. Emma hesitated, her hand hovering over the lever. If she shut it down, would the trapped consciousnesses finally be free? Or would she condemn them, and herself, to something worse? The decision was made for her. A shadowy figure materialized in front of the machine, its form flickering like static. It was humanoid but warped, its face a shifting mass of tortured expressions. "You don't understand," it hissed. "We are part of the machine now. Destroying it will destroy us all." Emma stared at the figure, her heart pounding. "You're already gone. This isn't living." The figure lunged at her, but she pulled the lever with all her strength. The machine screamed, a deafening, inhuman wail that echoed through the bunker. The green light flared, blinding them, and the room erupted in chaos. Sparks flew, wires snapped, and the walls shook violently. Emma and Nate dove for cover as the machine exploded, sending a shockwave through the bunker. For a brief moment, everything went silent. Then, from the wreckage, faint voices rose, soft and relieved. "Thank you." Emma helped Nate to his feet. both of them coughing from the smoke. The bunker was collapsing around them, but as they stumbled out into the forest, the oppressive weight of the signal was gone. They turned back to watch the bunker sink into itself, leaving nothing but a smoldering crater. Days later, Emma sat at her desk, staring at her now silent radio. She hadn't touched it since the bunker. As she reached to turn it off for good, the speaker crackled to life. "Emma, it's not over."